This is a story from a couple of weeks back on the Daily Mail, and it's one that really piqued my interest. Um, Essentially, it's something I really didn't expect to see in the Daily Mail, but it was an article on a novelist called Bella Pollen here, and essentially talking about an entity who visits her at night, and essentially she finds it sexually arousing. Now this last bit here, it says, and the scariest part, it's all in her mind. That's obviously the cop out. If you've been following my channel for a while I don't dispute the fact that there's plenty of people who probably do have this all in their mind, I would argue that there's actually plenty of entities of some description that are engaging with humanity and have done since time immemorial. So this, I'll just read this out to you guys, and then you can kind of make up your own mind. I'll have some comments at the end. The demon lover who haunts my nights, he's a faceless monster who disturbs top novelist Bella Pollen's sleep, and the scariest part, he's all in her mind. Just interjection, he's not in her mind. Novelist Bella Pollen had always been a bad sleeper. She was regularly awake at 4 a.m. Too early, she says, to start the day, and too late to take a sleeping pill. And it was 4 p.m. precisely that she heard the tread of unfamiliar footsteps coming up the stairs. I was alone in the house, which was a building site. My bed was pretty much the only piece of furniture there. I remember thinking somewhat irrationally that there couldn't be an intruder here because I'd locked all the doors and windows. Yet something was climbing those stairs. The door handle moved almost immediately, and almost immediately I felt the bed dip and a pair of arms encircle me from behind. On some level I knew I must be dreaming, that I was below the level of conscious reasoning, because instead of being terrified, I found it strangely comforting. I felt safe, cherished even. Swiftly she realized her error. Every time I breathed out, the arms seemed to squeeze me tighter and tighter, to the point where I could not get enough air into my lungs. I began to panic. I tried screaming, but no sound came out. I tried fighting, but my limbs were paralyzed. Eventually, I mustered enough strength to break free. Bella leapt violently out of bed and went to the bathroom to wash her face, believing it had been nothing more than a particularly vivid nightmare. She slid back under the duvet, reassuring herself that she was now awake. I could see the minutes ticking past on my bedside clock. How could I not be? She asks. What happened next would be provocative enough were it a chapter in one of her best-selling books. Bella, 56, mother of 4, was married to David Macmillan of the Macmillan Publishing Empire. Felt the entire scene repeat itself. The bed dipped. The same arms gathered me in. It was a male figure, featureless but very strong. The pressure built. I began to choke, but suddenly, unexpectedly, rippling up through the terror, I felt a savage, almost primordial arousal. The following night, over dinner, the novelist told her husband and friends about her visitation. Her guest was the late writer A.A. Gill. Immediately identified it as a paranormal phenomenon called incubus. I looked it up, remembered Bella. It said incubus was a demon who lies upon sleepers, especially women, in order to engage in sexual activity with them, and that it was a phenomenon recorded in every corner of the globe. In Ecuador, there was a dwarf who particularly liked hairy women and serenades them with a guitar. In Brazil, there's a dolphin disguised as a handsome man who drags women to the river with a hat covering his blowhole. German folklore describes a winged goblin. I had a man who can be best described as being made out of iron filings magnetically held together. By comparison, it was not so weird after all. I'll come back to that point about the iron filings. Behind it all, the demonic folklore lies a more earthly medical issue. As Bella was to discover, she was in fact suffering from a classic case of sleep paralysis, a neurological disorder where rapid eye movement continues after the person's woke up. In rapid eye movement, the brain has vivid dreams, but the body is paralyzed to prevent people from trying to act them out. Only the eyes and the muscles needed to breathe are fully functional. When this state extends into wakefulness, hallucinations such as Bella's demon are all a common response, as is an overwhelming fear. A sense of arousal and satisfaction is also a normal symptom. Neurologists cannot explain sleep paralysis. There you go. So it's conjecture, other than to say it is part of the brain and body's confusion at being simultaneously awake and asleep. Total conjecture. For Bella, knowing what it was did not prevent it happening again. I'll trick by this. Bella has written candidly about the encounters in her acclaimed memoir Meet Me in the In-Between. Each time she writes, the presence returned a few minutes after I'd initially broken free, to push into the deep crevices of my body, to take me to the edge of sexual abyss, and then carelessly drop me over, adding a frisson of shame to what was already a profoundly frightening experience. I was being defiled, brutalized. The creature had worked its full will upon every inch of my body, and yet I was taking pleasure in it. She was baffled as anyone by the visitations from what she now archly calls her demon lover. It first appeared when she was sleeping in the family's rural home, an Oxfordshire rectory which had suffered bats, rats, rot and flooding. She already considered it a candidate for a haunting. It was next to a graveyard, and I thought I inherited a ghost along with the woodworm and the mould, she laughs. After the building project was done, I resolved never to stay in the house alone again, but she then suffered further nighttime visitations in the American Midwest and in an outback hotel in Australia. I had travelled to Australia to finish a novel and had not thought about my demon for months. I was north of Adelaide in a roadside motel when I woke to the same sense of heightened unreality and a presence between my thighs. I reached down to protest and felt the unmistakable iron-filing fingers close over my hand and push it away. It was a bad moment because only then did I understand that the demon didn't live in a rambling house in the Cotswolds. It lived inside me, or maybe it was attached to her and was following her and interacting with her. Bella's husband teased her about her possessions, suggesting she saw a psychic or an exorcist. It's probably a good idea. But they knew what she needed was help for the stress and emotional baggage causing her increasingly disordered sleep. Now, in fairness, that's probably the first route anybody should go around if they're going through this kind of night fear or night visitation thing. Exhaust the traditional medical route for anything that would be causing something similar. I am calm and pragmatic during the day, but when I sleep, that control leaves me and all my anxieties surface. These encounters happened during a super stressful phase of my life. I was suffering crippling writer's block, running behind on my book, juggling children, and a 2-year refurbishment to our family home. I was having a life crisis, a professional crisis, a crisis of confidence. Sleep paralysis was a manifestation of my life paralysis. Getting stuck in life is fear-based. So I figured I better revisit my past to find source for that fear. I chose to write my way out of the problem. The result is her tragicomic memoir. It is her 6th book, following 5 novels, including the best-selling Hunting Unicorns. Meet Me in the In-Between documents Bella's fractured childhood and first marriage to the son of a mafia godfather, as well as her long relationship with David Macmillan, from whom she has recently separated. At its heart is the story of an innate restlessness which confounded her longing to put down her roots and build a family home. Bella, who now lives in West London, is the daughter of former Sotheby's New York chairman Peregrine Pollen and his wife Patricia. When she was 12, the couple split up and she traded her arty, unorthodox early years in Manhattan's Upper East Side for the rigours of an English boarding school. Aged 19, she founded 1980s fashion label Arabella Pollen, best known for its bright, sharply tailored pieces which promised to take women from the boardroom to the bar. Princess Diana bought several outfits off the peg, propelling the brand to fashion fame. The supermodel Margot Hemingway was another star fan, and it was Bella who created the iconic scarlet uniforms which Virgin Atlantic air stewards still wear today. These were the years when her sleeping patterns first went awry. In her early 20s, she had already had 2 small children, was commuting between London, Tokyo and Paris, building her business empire. She often managed no more than 4 hours in bed a night and relied heavily on Valium. The legacy was insomnia layered over the ultra-vivid nightmares which plagued her since her childhood. Then, a decade ago, the sleep paralysis began. Just a note, if you look at the Christian material on demons, they talk an awful lot about demons getting access through people through drug use, particularly methamphetamine. But you look at kind of lack of sleep, you look at heavy use of Valium, you're starting to look at a fractured psyche. And this is where Jinn and demons can take hold on people. She may never be rid of him. Today she recognizes sensations which precede the arrival of her demon sufficiently to wake herself up. She may never be rid of him, but at least he's more of an old friend than a demon lover. As I gained control of it, it became a purely platonic relationship, she said. These days, when it tries to frighten me, I say, "Oh, please," and it has the grace to look sheepish. Recently, it perched in my bed and said, "You do realize I'm married, don't you?" Which made me laugh. It still appears when I am stressed or anxious. For example, on the night my mother died. I knew it would visit because I was already in that strange netherworld of grief. Sometimes I don't stop at visiting because I'm curious to see what happens next. We've all been through a lot together, my demon and I. I'm almost waiting for the day it brings me a cup of tea and a boiled egg for breakfast in bed. She's fascinated by what she describes as her brain gymnastics. I'm so curious about how it tries to make sense of the in-between world in which it finds itself, a place where it is both awake and asleep at the same time. So, has she made sense of the sexual element of sleep paralysis? Not really, she confesses. But given the brain is deliberately playing tricks on you, perhaps it feels bad about its underhand behavior and adds in the sexual aspect as a sweetener. Oh, God. If only other stressful scenarios had that sexual benefit, that would be great. It's not a theory. I'll never get it past a neurologist, but it works for me. So, really, really interesting article there. I'm essentially talking about sleep paralysis. The sleep paralysis in itself, I've had it myself, and I'm sure plenty of you guys have had it too. But it's that feeling of waking up, your body is unable to move. The hormones that are secreted to actually make your body physically wake up and respond to impulses to move hasn't happened, and as a result, we're stuck, which is quite a frightening experience in itself, and that's entirely a brain chemistry physical thing. The bit that really strikes me about this story and why it makes me think that this is a Jinn entity encounter is the sexual aspect, because that is a quite common indicator of Jinn, essentially, and their unhealthy and obsessive interest in human sexuality. As I touched in before in some of my other presentations on Jinn specifically, that is an indicator of Jinn, a sexual relationship with a human being. This one seems specifically to be that. I would say that's a massive indicator of that's what is actually happening here. The bit that she mentioned around it looking like iron filings, that struck me as well as that kind of like, I think in America that there's this meme that's come out around shadow people, which is kind of an interesting thing. And if we go on Wikipedia here, it's talking about shadow people, and again, it's an old idea. It's also kind of called the man in the hat. And here's an interesting thing, going back to what we were saying earlier. Methamphetamine addicts report the appearance of shadow people after prolonged periods of sleep deprivation. And again, these are reported all over the world. One of the interesting things here they're saying here is around scientific explanations. Again, very similar to this article, is several psychological and psychological conditions can account for reported experiences of shadowy shapes seeming alive. A sleep paralysis sufferer may perceive a shadow or indistinct shape approaching them when they lie awake, paralyzed, and become increasingly alarmed. Neuroscientists Balan Jalal and V.S. Ramachandran have recently proposed neurological theories on why people hallucinate shadow figures during sleep paralysis. Now, these are the scientific explanations. I think there's spiritual explanations and esoteric explanations for it as well. Methamphetamine seems to have a track record of causing basically huge psychic fracturing in people that allows them to become subject of demonic attack. It's hugely common. Just Google methamphetamine and hallucinations and entities, you will hear the same thing. You'll see the same thing. It's widely reported in occult and esoteric circles. These psychological and physiological conditions that can cause these things, I'm no doubt these exist. That it's one of the challenges when you look into esoteric material, is that generally the same thing can happen, or generally the experience you're describing can happen for very clear and very explicable reasons, but it can also happen for very unclear, very inexplicable reasons, at least within the Newtonian worldview. If you have a more esoteric or magical worldview, it becomes quite clear and explicable what these things are that you are, in this case, this lady is being engaged and is under attack. I'm not sure under attack is the right word, but at least is being harassed, maybe, by this Jinn or demon entity. Oh, there you go. Bottom of this, Jinn, Night Terror, a bit more there. I'll put the links in the notes beneath the video here so you can have a look for yourselves and make your own mind up. It seems to me to have all the symptoms of what we would describe as a Jinn attack, but I'll be interested to see what you guys think. Anyway, my apologies for taking so long to do a video. I promise I will get more productive and do more in the coming weeks. And be sure to subscribe and let me know what you think. And give us a like. Cheers.